Welcome to another episode of Building a Leadership Mindset podcast. I'm your host, Nikki C. I'm super excited to have our very special guest today, and we're going to tell you a little bit about him before he gets on. His name is Justin Holcomb. He is a prolific entrepreneur and financial and life coach. He is a global fitness authority who has worked with clients in 17 different countries, primarily in the areas of fitness and financial life coaching. To date, he has made over $1 million in fitness and financial life coaching revenue. Furthermore, he is a #1 best-selling author and an esteemed 7-figure business strategist. His commitment, discipline, diligence, and pragmatism have endured him to many clients the world over. He believes in the power of focus, excellence, and commitment to value creation because he is convinced that these virtues empower him. I am super excited to bring him on this. Welcome, Justin, to BALM. How are you?
Thank you. I'm excellent. Thank you for asking. It's a privilege, and it's funny. My writer tries to make me sound like I'm really, really special, but I'm actually just an average guy.
Aren't we all? I love that. Just great when you could actually make things happen, right?
Yeah, definitely. I'm really happy to be here, Nikki. Thank you so
That's
much for having me on the show.
So absolutely. So I'm so happy to have you. We actually met at BLN Live in Virginia back in December, where we were mingling, we were networking, and we got all that great knowledge and wisdom from the amazing speakers that weekend. And I was just happy to share with you. And we also met. You got connected with the CLA as well, and just doing things together. And the Millie Club, which is super awesome that we're doing with Dr. O. So let's just talk a little bit about where you come from, just what were your life lessons very early on, and how did you get to where you're at today?
Yeah, let's see. So it's kind of funny. This is perfect timing. I'm actually writing a 15-minute speech that I'm going to give in Roseville, right next to Sacramento, in a couple of weeks. And the first attempt, I went and I made about 20 bullet points, and then I went way over 15 minutes because I just tried to share every little detail. And so I get to kind of bring those bullets down to about 5 bullet points. And so I guess what I'll do is I'll share a little bit about how, for one, when I was young, when I lived with my mother when I was really young. My parents split when I was about 10 years old, and it was a pretty tragic situation for me, just mainly because I was a little boy, 10 years old, leaning up against my bed, and my parents were kind of into a big argument in the hallway, and I went in between them, and I said, "Stop." And at about that time, my mom had tried to rush my father and trying to get him kind of entice and bait him and entice him a little bit, because they were in a really big fight, and it knocked their glasses off. And so it was just big traumatic experience. And when my mom actually, they put us to bed, and when my mom actually came to tell me that they were going to separate, they were going to take some time apart, I asked the question, well, what did I do? And when I thought back on that story later, it actually broke my heart to even think that I thought that there was something wrong with me at that young age. And so, to kind of get into it, that's just kind of where it started. I believe this sense of not being worthy and not being good enough. And so, and it's like, I was a 10-year-old. What could have happened, right? And so it just goes to show the power of our minds, even at such a young age. It's not, my parents were great. They were great people. They were hard workers, and they were loving. They took us on vacations. We lived in, we were in the suburbs. So it was really kind of like everything on the outside looked good, but internally, Both of them grew up in really poverty-stricken situations, and they both had something to prove to the world, but they didn't know how to do it together.
Wow.
And so it was a very detrimental experience for me at 10 years old, because I loved them both equally. And so I was pitted in between them. And that was tough. So basically what happened was my mom went through a lot of mental health things at that time. And so the way she knew how to deal with things was the way she was taught, which was to be screamed at and yelled at and just be very volatile and violent in the way that she spoke. Not so much in the way she was like, she didn't beat us or anything. I mean, we got regular whippings back then. That wasn't that big a deal. But sometimes, like when I got a little bit older, like I took her Jeep joyriding one time, and she came in and threw a phone and stuck it in the wall next to my head. So it was very volatile. So basically, by the time I got to 14, I decided I just couldn't deal with my mom anymore, and I went to live with my dad. And so the reality for me was that I went to live with my dad because my dad had something to prove to the world, like I said. So he was working 16, 18-hour days, 6-7 days a week. And ultimately, I knew that I could get away with more. So that's kind of how I started getting away with smoking weed and drinking alcohol and smoking cigarettes. And I had a girlfriend who was older. She was 19 when I was like 15. And I was just a cool kid. You know, I was like several sports athlete. I was a football star. I was a starter on soccer. And, I was a cool kid in a way, but inside I really wasn't very cool to myself. And so I used substance to deal with that. And so what happened was, and what transpired was, I snuck around a lot. Excuse me. I snuck around a lot, and I got away with a lot. And my dad was so busy building his empire, because my dad ended up becoming very successful in his own right and in his industry. And I just got away with a lot of stuff. But the problem with that was that it led me down a path to homelessness. And ultimately, I'm not talking about like, I just don't have a place that's my own. Like, I literally was on the streets. So it started when I ran away at 17. Basically, I didn't want to listen to anybody. I wanted to do my own thing. So I ran away and I started couch surfing. And I had a job, and I basically would trade people weed for a place to stay for the night. And I would usually stay about 3 days. I had like a system, and it actually worked for a while. So basically, stewardship wasn't something that was necessarily taught to me, but what was taught to me was, if you borrow something from a neighbor, or if you go stay at somebody's house, like, you either return it in better condition or you clean up more than what you actually did. So technically stewardship was taught to me, but I think it was just my parents didn't want me to be a little hoodlum. So like I said, they were great people, and they instilled some cool stuff into me, some values and stuff. So what would happen was that people would actually want me to stay at their house longer, because I would actually clean up a lot of extra stuff, but I always knew that I would outstay my welcome, and eventually there would be a big argument, or something would happen. I would just get into conflict. So I would go from place to place with all the friends that I grew up with. So I would just basically, like, I would find people whose moms were cool with us me coming over and me smoking with them and giving them a little dime bag or something. And then, like, if they had their own place, I would stay there, and I basically would just clean up, and then I would just disappear. And they would reach out to me and try to get me, because my mom kept me a phone this whole time. They would reach out to me and be like, "Where'd you go?" And I'm like, "Hey, I just had to go, sorry, whatever." So that's what happened when I was 17, and that kept on going. I basically just kind of like connected and linked with people until I got with this guy that I met from New Jersey, and he and I roomed together. And he got a job at the same place that I was working. So at the time, I was just a kitchen help, and ultimately, I worked my way. My boss came to me one day and said, "Justin, you'd make a lot more money if you were to go work as a server." So I was like, "I want to make more money." And she's like, "You'd be really good at it." So I started serving tables. And so I started making decent money as a server. Yeah, it was more money than I'd ever made. I was like just turned 18 years old, 19 years old in that area. I think it was 18. And ultimately what happened is there was an opportunity for me to step into a leadership role. And at 19, I started to run the entire front end, which, my head exploded. I didn't have any concept of a higher power, really. And it was just drink, smoke weed on the weekends, and pretty much every day I smoked. And I could handle the business. I could handle every bit of the business. I did the hiring, the firing. I did the training development. I did the schedules. I did the prep work and made sure everything was good to go there. And so basically what happened is I didn't really have any real source of power. I was really relying on myself. And this trend started to happen in my life where I would build up my entire life. So I built it up to be in management, and everything was going great. And then I would just tear it down. I would just destroy everything in my life and ruin my life for myself. And it was crazy. So what happened was one Friday night, I just decided. I told the hostess it was a chick that I hired, and just to kind of give a little bit of backstory, the girl that I was with, my girlfriend, I hired her too. So I was really I was really unprofessional. I was one of those guys. And I hired her, and she needed a place to stay. She wanted to get her own place, so I rented a room out to her in my place. So what happened was we stayed together for a while. Eventually, she quit the company, and I stayed there. And so eventually I told the hostess, I said, don't seat me anymore. I've got too much work to do. I didn't know how to delegate tasks, and I took on everything myself. I didn't really have any trust in other people to get the job done. And I knew that my boss, excuse my language, would bust my ass if it didn't get done. So I eventually became overwhelmed, and the enemy really had taken a stronghold in my life and was really ready to destroy everything for me. And so basically I just quit that job on a whim. I said, don't seat me. I've got too much prep work to do. She sat me. I took the apron off, rolled it up, set it down, and said, see you later. And I just walked right out. And that was when my life became increasingly difficult. I mean, really, really difficult, because I was the man there and I had everything going on there. I could do whatever I wanted. I could show up high. I just had a job to do, and everybody loved me. I served people so well, and I treated people so well that people would come in and spend $18 on 2 plates. It was a very affordable place to eat, and it's in Mississippi, so it's very cheap compared to other places. And so they would come in and spend $18, give me a $10 tip. Plus, I was salaried, so I was making money, and I was doing some other stuff on the side, some stuff I'm not very proud of, but I was just kind of slanging and doing this and that. And I'd been doing that my whole life, just a little bit here and there. I really wasn't like known as that guy, but it was always my friends that needed something. And so to make myself some free marijuana, I would get rid of some here and there. So basically what happened is I said, well, I quit that job, and I knew, I was like, I'm not going to be able to deal drugs. It's a small town, and I'll go to jail in a heartbeat. So I was like, all right, I started looking for other jobs. Every job I got as a server, I just couldn't handle being a subordinate anymore. I couldn't handle, like, my ego couldn't handle that I was a nobody and I wasn't making any money anymore. And they weren't going to take me back because I just walked out on them. And I actually spoke with that boss later, and she is just the sweetest lady ever. She moved to California, doing great. But either way, so the long and short of it is just that I started to work in a factory, and the factory started to really wear me down, and it started to really just take a toll on me because, like I said, I didn't have a source of power. I was relying on me. And so what happened was I ended up getting off on harder drugs. And the story of how that came to be was and they say that marijuana is not a gateway drug, but I'm telling you right now, it'll put you in spaces that you normally wouldn't be in. And it can get you caught up in some situations. So I was hanging out with a friend from high school. I had my own place. I was working at the factory from 5 p.m. to 5 a.m., 12-hour shifts, 5 days a week. And I had this guy kind of running my little side operation of giving my friends. I still had the little weed thing going. And I was getting my friend to kind of like do it for me. And so ultimately we would hang out on the weekends. I had 2 days. We'd play video games and we'd smoke weed together. It was chill. One day he came to me and said, hey, you think I could use your spare bedroom? Well, this is like one of my best friends from high school. So I was like, sure. I didn't really question it. I didn't really think about it twice. And so he went back there. That happened. It went on for a couple of months. And what eventually happened was, while I was at work, the girl that I was with, that same girl, she ended up going back there, and she realized that they were shooting heroin and meth into their arm with a needle. And so she told me about it, and it was just like, oh my goodness. Okay, well, all right. As long as he's not bringing it out of that room. I had a conversation with him, and I said, she told me what was going on, and I said, just don't bring it out of the room. I don't want to know about it. And so what eventually happened is she told me that it was meth and all this other stuff, and I knew meth would make you feel good, but I'd never done it before. So basically what happened to me was that friend. Then I was so tired from that job. I just didn't want to smoke weed or drink alcohol anymore. It wasn't doing its job. It really wasn't taking away the pain and the anxiety and what I felt inside. And so I called that same friend up and I said, it was Friday night. I just got off or Saturday morning. I just got off of work. I waited till Saturday night, called him up and said, hey, listen, I want to do some of that stuff that makes you go fast. And he was like, are you sure? I was like, yeah, I am. So ultimately I get there, I give him the money and I say, hey, this is what I got for it. He gets it for me and he says, well, how do you want to do it? And I was like, I don't know. What's the best way? And he was like, the best way is to put it in your vein. And I was just like, oh man, I don't know about that. But I agreed to do it eventually. And so he administered this for me because he was really good at doing it. He had been doing it a while. And I laid back on my back. And ultimately, my eyes got this thing started to hit me and it started to possess me and it started to come all over my body. And I felt better than I had ever felt in my entire life before. And so really what happened was I basically, we went to a house, or we went to a hotel party. We played beer pong. I had the best time I had ever had in my life. And that was the beginning of a really, really destructive time in my life. And so long story short, too late, right? No, I'm just kidding. Long story short, I ended up destroying my whole life. And I left I was living in a trailer out in the middle of the woods because I was in Mississippi. And my mom owned the trailer. I was just renting it from her. And I had taken out a loan from the bank and all this stuff. And so it was actually her property, but I was actually like a lease to own contract with her. Well, I destroyed my life. My company, I was coming in on Mondays after an entire weekend of being high on meth, and they saw the track marks and they called me in the office and they let me go. And so I didn't have a job anymore. I knew I couldn't sell drugs because I would end up in jail, and I was terrified of going to jail because my mom always told me I was too pretty to go to jail. And so I was like, I'm scared of what's going to happen in there. So I was like, no, I got to figure this out. So what ends up happening is I just procrastinate because the enemy has basically gotten a stronghold in me and is confusing me. Every plan I have, I just feel like that sense of, let's go back to that sense of not feeling good enough. I didn't realize this was happening at the time, but I didn't believe in anything that I did. I didn't believe in my plans. So every time I had a thought, the enemy would come in and just be like, yeah, but you can't do that because of this and because of that. So the long and short of it is that I left that apartment, I left that place, and actually I'm going to move spaces here before my phone dies. And I know we're running lower on time.
No worries. This is your time. As long as you get it charging, we are good.
Yeah. So basically, I left that place, I left that apartment or that trailer. What ends up happening is my mom goes to clean it, and it is full of needles and it's just completely destroyed. And I had just left it. And hey, honey, go lay down, please. I'm sorry, Nikki, one sec. All right. So I left that place. And my mom ended up being the one to go and clean it up because it was hers. And and you could just imagine as a mother, just as her son is now homeless, she's going to clean the place up, and there's just needles everywhere. There's just destruction. Bookshelves are turned over, and there was fights. There was all kind of mess. And so you could just imagine how she felt. And then, another point that I wanted to bring up is that I got caught getting chemicals to make meth once, and the judge told my mother that she should buy me a coffin for my 21st birthday because I wouldn't live that long. And so my mom told me all this later when I was in recovery. I had no clue. And the reason I'm sharing this is because there's a bunch of young people in our country, in America, that are on drugs that don't realize. A lot of people think when they're stuck in addiction, I'm just hurting myself. I'm not hurting anybody else. But the reality is that everybody that cares about you is hurting. You may not know it. You may not be aware of it. But everybody that cares about you is hurting when you're in that place. And so my dad was destroyed. Just his heart was hurting so bad for me. My mom, she was hurting so bad for me. And ultimately, to get to the actual point that I want to get to is that God stayed faithful to me throughout all of this. And so ultimately, what ended up happening, the enemy had such a stronghold in me. I thought that everybody that was Christian was demons and they were going to drag me to hell. I was also going through all of it's like, so once I went into meth, I went into a psychosis, and I went to jail a ton of times. They eventually stopped taking me to jail and started taking me to a mental institution. Like, they would arrest me and give me charges, but then they would take me to a mental institution. And if I complied with whatever the mental institution would say, then ultimately they would end up working out a deal with me to reduce the charges or something to that effect. They realized that I wasn't all there. In my opinion, I was literally at that point possessed. And so I was crazy. They told my mom at the hospital that I had made myself mentally retarded, that I would never be okay again, that I would never come back from this. And so you can imagine, like, I'm feeling a little emotional. I'm going to do my best to contain myself, but you can imagine the pain that a mother goes through when their son or their daughter is really in the grips of addiction, and the enemy has that stronghold in their heart. And so just the long and short of it is, I really want to share today that what changed my life and what I've done differently is I've started to understand that it's not my body, it's not my time, it's not my money, and it's not my life. It's the life that God breathed into me, and it's his money, his time, his life, and ultimately his body. And so by shifting that and understanding that I'm actually stewarding something, and life is not happening to me. So since this is a leadership podcast, I really want to point this out. I always thought life was happening to me. I was a victim to circumstance, and I was always my decisions and my actions and my outcomes were based on circumstance. But when I went to a training once, and I'd love to share this training with anybody, I'm not affiliated with them. I love them to death. And ultimately, it showed me that life was happening for me, that everything that was happening, God was allowing for the betterment of my character, and it was all going to be a part of my story so that I could then go and share this story with others so that they don't really have to go as far as I went in order to have healing and redemption in their life. You see, for me, the reality is, and it's come to me very rapidly, and God has really restored my life through Jesus, and Jesus was always my hero, even when I didn't believe he was God. But I actually took this and laid it at his feet about 2 weeks ago, and I said, God, I said, Dad, I call him Dad. I said, Dad, I don't know if Jesus really is God, but I'm just giving this to you. And so what happens is when you take things to him and then you're also stewarding the time properly. So I spend at least 2 hours and 26 minutes in the morning with God. That's my 10% tithe of time. And then obviously the 10% of financial, but we're not going to go there today. Ultimately, when we start to steward this properly, he starts to give us wisdom. He starts to grow wisdom in us and grow insight and grow his wisdom in us. And so that's really what I wanted to share today, is that ultimately my life was destroyed. My life was ruined. And God has restored things in a manner and so quickly. And so that's really what I get to do. I get to go, instead of I have to, I want to share another thing about language too, because language can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. See, a lot of times we pray and we ask for this and that, but we don't realize that we're then speaking, because God's given us he has entrusted us to co-create this reality with him. Okay, and that's what a leader does. A leader starts to speak in a different way. A leader says, I get to, and not I have to, right? Because the reality is life is happening for me and not to me. So what I want to share is that if you can focus on your language and you can focus on changing your mindset, okay, to a victor instead of a victim, and then you change your language, ultimately, a lot of these things are going to bring you to a place where you start to realize that you're going to pray like it depends on God, and you're going to act like it depends on you. And at the end of the day, you'll see that where you fall short, he is going to step in and he is going to handle those things for you. So if anybody wants to reach out, I'm not really sure how this goes. I'm so happy to be here. That's really all that I had as far as my talk, Nikki. So I'm going to pass it back to you and let you lead me through the rest of the interview.
Yes, absolutely. First and foremost, thank you for being vulnerable and being open and telling your story here, because a lot of successful people have been through these valleys that they're shameful of, or sometimes people don't even go through with finding their life purpose because of these valleys that they've been in. So I definitely want to hear more. What was actually the changing point? Who were your coaches? What did they do? But we're going to take a quick break to get this video in from our sponsor, and we'll be right back with some questions.
Right on.
Hi, my name is Jose Escobar, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Connected Leaders Academy. We're a growing tribe, a community of entrepreneurs all over the world, globally, all across the country, high performers, titans of industry. If you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to grow personally and professionally, scale your influence, develop your skill sets, move the needle in your business, more clients, more money, more profit, the bottom line, and of course, grow your circle and your network like never before, this is where you want to be. Join the Connected Leaders Academy today. We are scaling massively. We want to welcome you in. Check me out on Instagram and on Facebook, the @ JAESCO25. We look forward to having you join us. Take care.
Welcome back. We are talking to Justin today. Again, we connected through the BLN. We are part of the Millie Club and some other, the Connected Leaders Academy together. And he was just sharing his story of some challenges he had through his lifetime when he, it all started just, when he thought that he wasn't worthy and, things kind of started to happen in his life. But now as an adult, and he has realized he's found God, he's found the way to really shift his mindset and really be able to change those limiting beliefs that he had at a younger age. And, again, we go through life and we never know what the future is going to be, right? And sometimes it really takes us to go through some things we never thought we would ever go through. We never thought would happen to us or our families. And I just wanted to share that you said something very important that really hit home about, when you were going through your process and, with the substance abuse and things like that. I actually can relate of being a sister of my brother that was, did have a heroin addiction and, ultimately overdosed, unfortunately, back in 2017. And, thinking everything, I've done for him for I would say even like a 15, 16 years span, always broke my heart. And having to see my mom really seeing him go through that and, just knowing if he knew how much he was loved, would he ever, really change his mindset. And then when someone tells you, like, get your coffin ready because you're not going to make it to 21 is absolutely crazy to even hear, to even think. And I just wanted to say, when your mom told you this, was it after your mindset change or was it in the process of going through your change?
Yeah. To speak to that, it was actually, so I got sober for 3.5 years. I moved, so I had an option. I told you earlier, I was sharing earlier that I thought that everybody who was demons and everybody who wasn't. So the enemy had really confused me and really had me kind of like not knowing which way was up and down. So I had an opportunity to either go to an 8-month Christian rehab or move to South Carolina with my uncle. And so I thought Christian, oh no, they're going to take me to hell. I'm talking about, I was literally gone. Like I wasn't all there. And so I was like, they're going to take me to hell if I go to this Christian rehab. So I can't go there. So, and the whole time I was on a Greyhound bus on the way to my uncle's, I was just scared to death. Every time the lights were off, I was terrified. I just thought I was about to get yanked by some demons and gone to hell. And I don't know where that came from, but I remember just my stomach was messed up because of how terrified I was the whole ride there. And so what happened was I ended up getting my uncle was also at a time in his life where he was a raging alcoholic, and he was a former Marine, and he was out of the service, but he was very, very dangerous day, like a really naive kid. And I knew he could kill me in a heart, get the best of him. So I backed off of that, and ultimately I moved out to a recovery house, and I stayed in that recovery house for 3.5 years, or no, I stayed for 2.5 years. And it was during that time that I got sober that my mom and my dad had shared with me what their experience was, because I got to make amends to them through that process. And so when I went to them and I was like, hey, I'm sorry for this, and this, they were like, just whatever you're doing, just keep doing it, because you destroyed us, you know, and you didn't know you were doing it. So it was actually, I would say that it was like during my mindset shift, but there was a lot, I would say it was during, you know, we're all in a process. We're all kind of in a different stage in our process. So in reality, it was during, but it was a long mindset shift, because that was when I was 25 and now I'm 31.
Okay. So when did the coaching start? When did you start getting into community with people that were going to help you shift that mindset? Oh, we lost him.